Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for turning up. Good to see so many friendly faces out there. How is everybody this morning? Good to see, good to see. So my name's John Coldicutt. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Planday, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how technology can support care for an aging population. First of all, just a little bit about Planday. So who we are. We are a European software company that's really focused on creating a much better level of engagement between any shift-based business and the employees that work for them, and we're doing a lot of work in the care sector right now. The system comprises staff rostering is sort of the core of the system, essentially making sure that you have the right people with the right skill sets in the right place to deliver care to people that need it. But we also have quite comprehensive HR management. We can make sure that employees have all of their certifications, right to work, any training stored in the Planday system. We allow time tracking and also geofence time tracking. So if you're providing remote care, we can ensure that employees can clock in digitally at the point of care, so you can keep track of where they are and when they start and finish their shift. Very, very key to a distributed organization. We provide comprehensive communication between employees and managers, but also employee to employee, which is really key, and also allowing them to be able to swap shifts with each other without the manager necessarily having to be a bottleneck in that whole process. And with Planday, when you get started with Planday, we provide pretty comprehensive onboarding and support to make sure that you're fully able to use the system and your employees are fully able to use the system, so there's no fear of changing to a system like Planday. In terms of who we serve, so we have many hundreds of clients in the care sector, including over 200 in the UK. Some of these logos are represented. I'm trying to see if I recognize anybody from our customer base. Not yet. What am I going to talk about today? So first of all, I'm going to depress you a little bit with some of the challenges that you're all facing. So the challenges the sector is facing in 2019 and beyond. But then hopefully bring you back up again with some hope around how technology can help address some of these challenges. But then, more importantly, talk about employee engagement, because I think this is going to be a really, really key element in order to help keep businesses able to provide care through the employees that they employ, rather than necessarily having to always go to agency workers. And then if we have time, we can do some Q&A. Otherwise, come and see us at the Planday stand. You can see the enormous Planday planet kind of rotating around up there. So we're literally just behind you. So first of all, challenges in the sector. Well, obviously there's an ever-growing demand. Right now there are around 12 million people in the UK that are 65 years or older. And unfortunately, around about 10% of those don't receive the care that they need. So there's already a gap between the number of people that need care and the care that the system is able to provide to them. But this is only going to get worse. So by the year 2066, which will be exactly 100 years after England won the World Cup, there'll be over 20 million people in the 65 plus category. So it's not going to quite double, but it's getting there. One of the real challenges we have is the gap between the cost of care and what's required. Already in the last year, the cost of care has risen by about 7%. And according to the King's Fund, there's a deficit today of around 1.4 billion between the cost of care and the funding that's being provided to the care sector. And that gap's only going to increase. We're starting to see home care providers in many regions of the UK having to close. And one of the key elements driving a lot of this behavior is employee turnover. There's around about 1.6 million people providing care in the UK, so it's actually quite a big chunk of the UK workforce. But unfortunately, turnover in the sector is 30% and growing, according to the Skills for Care report from last year. Actually, in the southeast, it's growing the fastest, or it looks like sort of East Anglia and East Midlands, it's growing the fastest. But in terms of the subsectors of care, where employee churn is happening, it tends to be more in the independent sector. And actually around adult domiciliary care is actually by far the highest turnover. So care in the community is facing enormous levels of churn from their workforce. And this is forcing a lot of providers to rely on agency workers. Agency workers are starting to become more and more prevalent across the whole care sector. Obviously, in between permanent and temporary staff, you have bank or pool workers. And I guess the last line of defense is going out to agencies, but that's starting to happen more and more. We're hearing that more and more from our customers. And I think that the challenge here is you could end up with an over-reliance on agency workers, which could potentially destabilize the levels of care that you are able to provide to your patients and residents. And this leads to tensions with employees, with staff. There's perhaps a little bit of a them and us scenario between permanent workers and agency workers. A perception that they earn more, a perception that they don't provide the same level of care, creates tension among your actual permanent and temporary staff. But more than that, it provides probably a degraded continuity of care. And that's not to suggest that all agency care workers are made the same, but I think most people would agree, or most of our customers would agree, that if they can complete most of the tasks or fill most of the shifts that they have with permanent and temporary workers that they've worked with for years, that really know the residents, that really know how the system works, then it's actually beneficial to the patients and residents. But then, just to make matters even worse, we have this Brexit thing looming on the horizon. Deal or no deal, says Boris. We're going to leave at the end of October on Halloween, right? And this is a problem for the sector, obviously, because there's a good proportion of EU workers in the care sector in the UK. And even though they'll probably have the right to remain, it's probably going to discourage more people coming in from Europe. So when those people either decide to have a career in another sector or retire, then there's going to be less coming in from the EU to support those. So we're going to end up with an increasing skills gap potentially, which is very worrying. And we're seeing this again across all sectors of care, especially in nursing. Actually, there's around about 17% of nurses in the UK are EU nationals, and a lot of non-EU, non-British nationals as well. So clearly, this is going to provide challenges in recruitment. So with less EU workers coming in, and a greater requirement for staff as the aging population grows, you're going to have to work harder and harder to recruit, to bring in the skills in order to deliver the type of service that your residents require. And the problem with this now is that there's a perception issue with working in this sector. So according to Anchor Hanover Group, a study from last year, around 78% of people are unlikely to consider beginning their career in social care. And in fact, parents aren't even encouraging this. So 71% of parents wouldn't encourage their children to go into social care. So for some reason, this is seen as a particularly unattractive career to get into, which is a shame, because it's obviously a highly noble and probably very fulfilling career. And 67% think that a career in social care is actually undervalued by society, which is crazy, but it's a perception, right? So if people feel that way, then it's up to the industry to, I guess, try and challenge that, to really sort of show people that there's a real career to be had here that is meaningful, and to try and change that perception. And what we're finding as well is that agency-mediated work is actually starting to seem more appealing to people that want to take a career in this sector. There's a perception that there's more flexibility for agency workers. There's a reduction in the stress that they have. I guess they don't feel as committed to the organizations that they work for, and even a potential for higher earnings, which is a little bit of a shame. And one quote from a King's College report is that agency carers are starting to choose agency work as a lifestyle choice. The ability to have the flexibility to pick your shifts, to maybe decide you're going to take 6 months off to go and do something else, and earn more money when you are working. It's starting to seem to be a much more attractive route for people to go down. So all a little bit depressing so far, but hopefully a little bit of hope. So how can technology help?